Cordless, everybody. It's Monday night, October 28th, 2024. It's 9 p.m. on the East Coast of the United States, 6 p.m. on the West Coast, 8 a.m. in Singapore, noon in Sydney, Australia, and here where I'm sitting in Northeast Minneapolis, it's 8 p.m. Central Daylight Time, only for a few more days, then goes to standard. I am Jim Peters, and welcome to another edition of Jim Peters at Night. This is episode number 170, if you're keeping score at home, and I hope you are. Okay, our guest tonight is Teri Christoph. She's a writer for redstate.com. We have on, she's the second person from Red State we've had on here. Jennifer Oliver O'Connell comes on a regular basis. And we got people, all sorts of people from Salem Media. Matter of fact, for part 2 tonight, I have a whole bunch of weird UFO news. I'm trying to get Jazz Shaw to come on after the election to talk about it. You know, he's our UFO. He's not just our UFO guy. He's Salem Media's UFO guy. He writes for hotair.com. He's a weekend editor there. But there's a whole bunch of crap going on. It's unbelievable. Who knows? Now, today, here in Minneapolis, we set a record for temperature. Or tied it anyway, 75 degrees, which is very, very unusual for October. The average temperature for this day, I think, is supposed to be 52. And tomorrow it's going to be 78. And get a load of this. I keep telling you, people think we're the icebox of the nation here. And we are 4 months of the year. The other 8 months is quite nice. And usually our summers are quite hot. But it's going to be 78 tomorrow. On Thursday morning, we're supposed to get snow. I just don't believe it. Anyway, and don't call me and tell me it's climate change. It's not. It's weather. Got that? It's weather, because it may be hot here, but that doesn't mean it's hot all over the world on today anyway. So anyway, yeah. So we've got an election coming up in 8 days, and Teri's going to talk to us about that. We're going to talk to her about that in just a second. But first, here's a little word from Conk News. Hi, all. I want to talk to you about Conk News. You've probably heard me talk about this before, but if you're a news junkie, you should try this out. Conk News is a news aggregator. Now, there are plenty of news aggregators on the web, but Conk News is different than all the rest, and here's how. Most other news aggregators will lump the top stories from each news source under that news source. The top 10 stories, like, for example, from Fox News, Breitbart, the New York Post, etc. What Conk News does is it sends its servers out onto the web to over 75 different news sources every 3 hours. And yes, this is an automated process, but in this case, that's actually a good thing. And collects the latest stories from said 75 sources and then lays them out on its own front page in the order they were posted, regardless of the source. So you see the latest stories at the top of the front page, regardless of where they're from. And this is all free to you. You don't need to log in. You don't need to subscribe, register, nothing. It's completely free. All you have to do is go to conk.com to check it out. That's conk.com, 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 Conk News. Teri, are you there?
I'm here.
You like the dramatic music? Just for you.
I appreciate it. I like a little walk-on song.
Yeah, we'll give you some walk-off, too. That'll be about a half an hour. So, Teri's calling us here. We're talking to her. She's in Leesburg, Virginia right now. I'm in Minneapolis. How long have you been writing for Red State, Teri?
I have written off and on since about 2016, mostly off because I've been pursuing other career things, but I've decided to concentrate on writing. So I'm happily back. So yeah, it's been off and on, but really the most recent stint's only been the last 6-7 weeks. So I kind of got in right when things were getting good with the election and all the other fun things that happen along with it.
You want to talk about some of the other stuff you've done, or no?
I'm happy to talk about whatever you want. I mean, we are about 8 days away, hopefully, from knowing who the next president is. It could be 17, 25. Who knows how many days it's going to be? But I mean, it's really getting down to the wire. So, I mean, I definitely got the election on my mind. But, Jim, tell me what's on your mind out in beautiful Minneapolis. Because
I want
to talk. We're a lot colder here in Leesburg, and we shouldn't be.
Well, say again, what was that?
I said, we're a lot colder than you guys here in Leesburg. We're like 55 today, which is kind of weird. I was listening to your weather forecast. So I was like, whoa.
It's kind of nuts. I don't know. We basically didn't have a winter last year. And that's, really unusual here. And the last month, September, was the warmest September on record. And this month's going to be the warmest one, too. So I don't know. I don't know what's going on. But, I'm a climate change denier. So it's not climate. It's weather.
I'm right there with you with weather. Exactly. But I don't know. What is top of mind to you right now?
Oh, the election, which is the reason I want to talk to you, because you've had quite a few pieces. I mean, you've basically been writing at least one piece every day on Red State, and they're fantastic. And of course, you wrote a piece today about J.D. Vance taking this guy's really amazing. I think you agree with me, and I think you've even said this in your writing, and that is, a lot of people kind of doubted at first whether Trump had made the right choice for his VP, and now it's obvious he did. I mean, it's like, this guy's really, first of all, he's brilliant and he's great on his feet. I mean, I can't say a bad thing about him.
No, I agree with you. And I'll say that I live here in Virginia, where we have Glenn Youngkin as governor. So I kind of thought that he'd be the pick just because he did so well after Republicans weren't doing so well. But I'm really pleased. The more I learn about J.D. Vance, the more I like him. And I think it was really, the tide turned at the vice presidential debate, where I think he really made an effort to show, his less political side, his more personal side. And I think that really shows, and is really, his popularity, I think, has gone up quite a bit. And I think a lot of people are very, very happy that Trump picked him. But yeah, I mean, he really knows how to handle the questioning from the left. And obviously any show that he goes on, almost any show, is going to be pretty hostile to him. And that happened yesterday, I think, on CNN with Jake Tapper, who basically was personally offended by absolutely everything on behalf of the Democrat Party. And JD just kind of handled it so well. The guy went to law school. He really knows how to pivot and turn it around on the Democrats, which I just love to see. And that's what I wrote about today was, this whole Trump is a Nazi. If we elect Trump, he's going to be a fascist dictator and all of that nonsense. And he just really turned it around and said, who would the guys that actually fought the Nazis have voted for? And I thought that's really all you have to ask.
Yeah.
Because, if we're going to go on with this nonsense, how about the people that defeated the dictator, the people that defeated fascism? What would they do? And of course, they're not going to vote for Kamala Harris, because she stands for nothing and she's incredibly weak.
Now, I'm sure you've seen this. The surveys done by Pew and others, and Gallup too, have said now that the trust that Americans have in the mainstream media is at an all-time low. What makes
so?
And what makes them think this? I don't understand. This just seems, the logic here just baffles me. So they went through first term of Trump, lie, Russia, laptop isn't real, blah, 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 blah. He's a Nazi, he's Hitler, Okay, so they get in office, they completely stink the place up, totally, completely. I mean, I can barely think of a single good thing Joe Biden's done. And then so Trump runs again, and then they pull the same thing. I mean, who do they think they're fooling?
That is a really good question, because there was a focus group. I think maybe Mark Halperin had done it on his show, where he had a bunch of undecided voters from Pennsylvania, which is obviously a very important state this cycle for Trump and for Kamala Harris. And he asked them, they're undecided. They're trying to, figure out who they're going to vote for. And he asked them, is this Trump is a fascist line working? And they're all like, absolutely not. We're sitting here with this economy where we're struggling to pay our bills and to buy groceries and all of this. And they think that this fascism nonsense is going to be the thing that gets us. And they all have this look on their face when asked, like, absolutely not. This is terrible. So I know why they're doing it is because Kamala doesn't have any policies policies she might have are going to be deeply unpopular, and she can't explain them. So of course they're going to have to attack Trump, who, by the way, as you point out, has already been in office. And like I've noticed in other, noted in other articles I've written, there's not he was not exactly known for, taking revenge against his political enemies. So it's not like, we got 4 years of him under our belt now. We know that he's not Hitler. He's not a fascist. He's not a dictator. So it's really frustrating, but thank goodness we only have eight more days left, or, give or take a few, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. So my theory here, or not theory, or my projection is that I think they've completely blown their wad for the long term. I'm starting to see a scenario here where the Republicans basically dominate politics for like the next generation, 20, 30, 40 years, kind of the same way the Democrats did from like 1940 to 1980. They completely ruined this for themselves. That's the way I look at it anyway. And also,
yeah.
And on top of that, and I think you alluded to this to your column, and David Strom comes on the show from Hot Air regularly. He's the associate editor there. He wrote a column about this, and I think Brandon Morris on Red State did too, about the fact that there does seem to be literally a part of the American public, about 20% maybe, that's literally seems mentally ill. It's like they are not living in reality. No, I'm really serious here. They're not living in reality.
No, it's true.
It's
true.
People joke about Trump derangement syndrome, but it's more than that. It's,
It's an identity that they're trying to take on because they've got this void in their lives, and they take it on as trans activists, as gays for Gaza, but also as being against Trump because they feel like they're being oppressed because they're, unhappy with themselves. So they project onto other things like Trump or like Israel, these things that they think they're going to come out against them, and that's going to fill them up with some sort of joy. But I'm not seeing a lot of joy from the left. And I think you're right. The Democrat Party's gotten themselves in real trouble by going that far to the crazy side.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I can't see who's going to be the person that's going to bring them out of it, because you got people like Tulsi Gabbard who are coming over to the Republican side. And the Republican bench, as I noted in the article about J.D. Vance taking on that question of is Trump a Nazi, is that they have a really deep bench. I mean, J.D. Vance has just turned 40. He's around for a long time. And they've got Glenn Youngkin. They've got such a deep bench that I don't see how the Democrats get themselves out of this.
Yeah, this is a really unique election too, because we know if Trump wins, he can only serve 4 years. So he's already a lame duck.
Oh, right.
But he's kind of teeing up Vance for the second act, which is, I don't know. The whole thing's really fascinating. You were talking about Israel. The funniest thing I've heard in almost a year, and I've constantly mocked it on the show, is Queers for Palestine.
Right?
Yeah.
Gays for Gaza.
Yeah, Gays for Gaza, right. I know. I had Jonathan Tobin, who's the head of the Jewish News Service, on this show a few weeks ago. And it's like, I hadn't heard Gays for Gaza until he brought it up. Queers for Palestine, I knew. But
That's all the same. It's all the same delightful crowd.
Yes, it is. But the thing is, first of all, why? I mean, I'm 69 years old, and I'm sitting here and I'm thinking, what the hell's happened to society? These kids are so stupid. I mean, I won't talk for you because I don't know how old you are. In my time, we were stupid, but not like this. I mean, Jesus. I mean, yeah, you try being queer in Palestine. No. You try that. Go ahead.
I agree. And I'm a Gen Xer, so a little behind you. But my kids, and I have 4 of them, and my oldest is 26, my youngest is 17. They're all Gen Z. So through them, I get plenty of exposure to what's going on. And it goes back to what you were just saying. It's a deep, deep mental health crisis. It was made worse by COVID. I can say that first, without a doubt, with certainty that was the case. But it's mental illness. These are young people, and I almost feel bad. I feel like my generation, maybe that raised them very poorly, to not have religion, to not have faith in anything other than, I don't even know what they have faith in. It's not God. It's not anything wholesome or good, and they're I almost feel sorry for them, except for they're so crazy about it. They make it very hard to feel sorry for them and like them when they're so absolutely nuts and rabid about it. But they are suffering. I mean, I know they're suffering.
Well, Teri, can I ask, are any of your kids in college then? Or been going?
Not currently. I have 2 grads. I have one that didn't go to college, and then I have one is a senior in high school. And we're putting in the applications because November 1st is one of the first big deadlines if you want early decisions. So yeah, we're about to embark on that journey again. But I have 2 that went through that are recent grads.
God, I forgot what I was going to ask you. It's terrible. But I know what I was going to. Let's get off a little topic. Let's get off topic if you don't mind my doing so.
Sure.
So you're a parent. You're a parent. Is the problem okay? This is I do not have children, so I can't relate. I have a zillion nieces and nephews, and I have all my friends have killed children, so I've watched this. I wonder if the problem is. I can't speak for you, but my generation, our parents basically ignored us. It was like, go off and play somewhere, just get out of it. It's like I don't know if you ever read this. Dave Barry wrote a very, very famous essay about growing up when he's 10 years old in the 1960s. And all he remembers is his parents having parties and people coming over and drinking, So, I mean, that wasn't true of everybody, but really it was basically, they didn't pay any attention to us. And then you get to, I don't know when this change happens, and tell me if I'm wrong. That's why I'm bringing this up. It's like the opposite it's the pendulum swung in the opposite direction. Now we have helicopter parents, and every kid's day is playing down to the minute. And it's like, well, that's no way to live either. And did you observe? My sister tells me she observed this in spades. Do you have any thoughts on this, or?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in the 70s and 80s, so I know that feeling. And I'm the youngest of 8 kids, and I was definitely not paid attention to.
Oh my God!
My sister.
You were the youngest of
me.
8 children?
Oh yeah, we're an Irish Catholic family, so
yeah. Okay,
my sister, who's 7 years older than me, basically was raising me.
Right.
Because
I have to ask you though, the stereotype of that situation is that the first kid gets an enormous amount of attention, and then as you go down the line, by the time you get to the end, you probably didn't get any.
That is 100%, and it worked out really well. It's very nice to fly under the radar and get away with a lot of stuff, but I fear that it's my generation, Gen X. Like, I had my first child, a girl, in 1998, and I can remember when she was about 3. My husband's a soccer freak, so we started her on a little toddler soccer thing, nothing too crazy. But I can remember the pressure of, we've got to give them all a medal and a party for participating. I mean, they didn't even keep score at that age. And it was really when I was, early in my motherhood, that these messages of, you can't, criticize your child. You can't shame them for anything. You must always be lifting them up. Don't say no. Never use the word no. Rephrase it into something else. So I fear something went wrong with the Gen X generation. And I haven't really given it a ton of thought as to why. But I remember getting those messages bombarded at me from, all sorts of things. The Oprah Winfrey Show, Dr. Phil, and all these things. You got to give them a soft place to fall. You can't criticize them. So, and that's unfortunately what we're seeing with these young adults that are incapable of living fulfilling and, professional and satisfying lives. It's kind of sad, and I fear that I have some blame to take for it.
You don't have any theories of why this all happened? Any ideas at all?
Well, I will say, when social media, it was really a thing. I can remember being pregnant with my first child and finding like a message board back in the day. And I think you start, I'm trying to figure my way through all of this, and you start seeing these messages. And I do think social media had something to do with it. And my husband and I talk about this all the time. Like, we were the first generation to raise kids who are on social media. We had no idea what it was going to turn into back in the day when, my daughter was 12, 14, gets her first phone. She's downloading stuff. We had no idea that it would turn into this I think, nightmare that it is today, where they have too much information. So I think there's a lot of weird things that happened when we were starting to raise our kids, but I do think social media, we were unprepared for what it was going to do.
Yeah, and my theory is that it's probably going to be another 20, 25 years before it becomes, be- people will finally get tired of the novelty of it. I remember, this is how old I am, Terry. I remember the beginnings of television. And one of the reasons television was such an enormous novelty in the 50s and 60s that people just
Right.
watch TV. And it's kind of the same thing that's going to happen with social networking right now. It's so like new and so enticing that people are just completely obsessed with it. I think I have the feeling, I hope that in about 15, 20 years, that's going to start to subside. Matter of fact, I don't think it'll ever go away, but I think the prominence in our life, maybe it will decrease, but what do I know? I'm just a guy on the radio.
Well, I mean, I think it has its good things. It's got its good points. It's a great way of sharing information. It's a great way to stay in touch with people. But, a funny thing, I have my 24-year-old daughter, who is a very artsy, cool. She lives in Richmond, Virginia, and she is very much into a stripped down, bare bones, traditional, let's go back to, previous generations and find our inspiration, their way of living. She, not that she doesn't use technology, but she's just, let's wear she goes and thrifts all the time to get clothes, vintage clothes.
Yeah.
And I think it's really appealing to a lot of these kids, this non-digital life, this offline life where she's learning to compost, and she's planting a garden and growing her own food. So there's this weird, cool thing that's also happening. So yeah, there's a lot of them out there with pink hair that, want to go and I guess have a gay pride parade in Gaza or something like that. But there's a lot of them that are rejecting it. Like, this is too much. It's too much for them to handle, quite clearly.
So are you saying that
coming in?
You think your daughter's basically kind of growing out of it? Is that what you think's happening?
Yeah, she never really liked it. It's funny. With this particular daughter, I can remember there was a middle school, when she was back in middle school, they had a career day, and somebody's dad or mom came in and talked about, how much data is being collected from them, like in a positive way. Like, when you get onto these social media sites, we collect all this data and we have all this information about you, and then we can recommend great things to you. And I can remember her coming home being disgusted beyond belief. She was probably 13, just being absolutely disgusted at the idea that these tech companies, the governments, are monitoring everything that she's doing. So there's a whole flip side to it, and you probably don't hear from these people because they're not on social media, and they're not marching through the street. They're the ones that are like, this is too much. I'm going in the complete opposite direction.
Yeah, I think she's a smart girl,
She is, but she lives in Richmond, Virginia, which I don't, it's probably a much, much smaller version of Minneapolis. There's a lot of wackadoos out there. There's a lot of crazy going on in Richmond, Virginia.
Yeah. So this entire generation then went to college, and I don't understand. This is the other thing I don't understand. I mean, they have now legitimatized anti-Semitism. I don't, it's like, it's mind boggling to me. Okay, so we hate Jews, and last year they were kind of being coy about it. Now at this point, where especially schools started back up again, from what I understand on certain college campuses, they're not even trying to hide it anymore. They hate Jews. That's wonderful. That's terrific.
Yeah, like the smartest people too, like Columbia.
Yes,
the really smart kids
I know.
Are the biggest anti-Semites out there. But I think, you ask them, you get one or two questions in, and they can't defend their position, even though they're the kids that got the 1600 on the SAT and took all the AP classes. They still don't know why they believe what they think they believe.
No, they don't. That's correct. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I guess they're trying to belong or whatever. I don't know what it is, but it's certainly interesting that they're not quite sure why they're anti-Semites, but they're very much anti-Semites.
There's a lot of social pressure involved, I think,
I guess so, at the upper echelons, which just kind of leads you back to, what we were talking at the beginning. Like, Kamala Harris is trying to portray the right as being a bunch of Nazis, anti-Semites, when in fact, you can look at the Democrats demonstrably being anti-Semites. The
Yeah.
Nazis, the people that want to dictate what people can and cannot do.
Right. And Terry, I don't know if you mentioned, I know I got this from one of your pieces or somewhere else, but someone's brought up the fact, and this is really true. I thought about this. I couldn't come up with any alternatives other than January 6th, which was a terrible thing, but still not an insurrection. Other than that, I can't think of a single example of right-wing political violence in the last 10 years. It's all come from the left, all of it. And
Oh, absolutely.
they go on and on and on about the fact that we're so dangerous. I just find this hilarious. People talk about the
Oh my gosh.
projection, the psychological thing of projection, but this is just plain stupidity. And so Trump gives us this, and you wrote about this today and yesterday. Trump gives this rally at Madison Square Garden, and all they can come up with, and I'm getting back to what we started with, all they could come up with is the fact is like, well, the Nazis did this in 1938. Well, yeah, right, okay, sure. It's like, meanwhile, there's 100,000 people there. There's 20,000 in the hall. There's 80,000 people just standing around outside. I guess they're all Nazis, just like you said,
Well, a significant number of them had Israeli flags, they had yarmulkes. They were a significant number of Jews in the audience there. And I wrote about it because Ben Shapiro pointed it out in that very, simple, direct way that he always does, is that, oh, sure, it was a Nazi rally with the Israeli flag and with Jews praying in the aisles. That's exactly like a Nazi rally.
Of course, yeah.
They've had this plan for a while because, they've even to the few days leading up to the rally, the left was starting to post the pictures and commenting about it. So they were setting it up. And I think what we're going to see, because what we're talking right now is Monday night, and Tuesday night, tomorrow, Kamala Harris is giving her closing argument or whatever they're calling it on the Ellipse in Washington, D.C. And I think it's going to reach absolute fever pitch with that nonsense tomorrow. I think she's going to double, triple, quadruple down, whatever the most you can do. And she's going to do it tomorrow with the Nazi theme.
Yeah.
And then I think it's going to go over, not very well. And I think by the end of the week, this is just me guessing. I think by the end of the week, we're going to see Democrats running away from her and trying to put all their efforts into winning the House because they think Trump's going to get this White House. They think Republicans are going to get the Senate, and almost definitely they are. So they're going to go and try and get the House. And I think they're going to abandon her because this is a terrible line of attack, just terrible. And that's what I think is going to happen. I'm certainly going to be keeping an eye out for it.
Do you think if, assuming Trump wins next week, do you think there'll be a lot of violence in the country?
Yes. We definitely saw it in his first, the day the inauguration day. I know here in D.C., and I'm just a little bit outside of D.C., so I'm, kind of keep an eye on what's going on there. And they definitely were setting cars on fire, turning them over. It's going to be bad, and I'm assuming you think so where you are too.
Yeah. I am not in one of
the. Are you expecting to see it?
Yes, but here's what I'm thinking. I'm wondering, and maybe this is just wishful thinking too. I'm wondering if people are, including liberals, are so exhausted by what's happened in the last few years, and also if Trump's victory is really decisive, and there's a good possibility it's going to be, it might be a blowout. Especially in that case, I do expect violence, but I don't know if we'll have it as much as we did in 2020. I don't.
Well, I'm sure you're very familiar with this, but I've seen it here in the Virginia area, Richmond, and other things. Is that these paid agitators come in and get it started, and then the other people join in because it's their cause. They feel like it's part of it. So I think there's always, whether they're Antifa, I don't know, but I assume they are. And I think they are paid, and they're paid to be there. So I think they're going to be there whether Trump wins or Kamala wins. I think they're going to torch towns no matter what happens.
Yeah.
That's what they do.
Right. And I agree with you. I think they're paid too. And this isn't about this. This isn't an example of paid people per se, but I just find it really hilarious that on Friday in Houston so she filled the hall there, 30,000 people. But did she fill the hall or did Beyonce fill the hall? Now, I don't know if you follow this. Because, all right.
I did a little bit.
Beyonce, spoke. And then it turns out everybody realized Beyonce is not going to sing. And it appears that most of those people came to hear Beyonce sing, not had anything to do. And when it turned out she wasn't going to sing, the crowd turned on Kamala. It's like basically all the politicians. There was constant booing, and a lot of people left. And it's like, I just find this just hilarious. Okay, yeah, you filled the hall. Yeah, good for you, honey. I'm terrible.
Oh yeah, they were not happy. Apparently, it's the second time that Beyonce's kind of let her down. I guess there was talk that Beyonce would perform maybe at the Democrat National Convention back in August, and that didn't happen. So, I would think you would at least do one song if you were that into Kamala, but not looking that hot right there. And who cares? I mean, who is Beyonce going to convince that isn't already voting for Kamala? Well, that's what I don't get. Like,
exactly.
They really love to say all these celebrities support them, but I'm like, I'm sorry, Mark Ruffalo, Bruce Springsteen, they're not changing anybody's mind.
No, I think it's actually the mentally disturbed people that follow celebrities. It's like,
they were already going to vote for her. She's got the mentally disturbed vote. She's got it locked up. It's locked up. There we go.
I know.
That's a good one. I'm going to use that. I'm using that.
Okay, you take that. You take that. All right. Before we end here, I want to talk about one more thing that you wrote about today too, and this is about the exploding ballot boxes in Oregon and Washington. All right. So now I'm kind of assuming people on the left are doing this, especially in Oregon. But what is the point? I mean, are they just assuming that they're going to keep Republicans' votes from being counted because they're going to keep Democrat votes from being counted too? Once again, am I stupid?
Yeah. You're not. I don't think there was a lot of forethought in whoever's doing this. And it sounds like they've connected. There was one in Washington, in Vancouver. There was one in Portland. And I guess earlier in the month, there was an additional one in Vancouver area. The thought that I had was that in Vancouver, it was possibly votes in the congressional contest.
Oh yeah,
which is very close. So I was wondering, that maybe they think if it's just. I think there was a few thousand votes that separated them, and I'm blanking on their names right now. Joe Kent is the Republican, and I cannot remember the Democrat incumbent woman's name, but she only won by a few thousand votes. So I guess the thought being, if you blow up enough drop-off ballot boxes, you might shave. I don't know. But you're right. If you're blowing up Democrat votes too, so I don't know what it is other than chaos. They like chaos. They want chaos. It's obviously what Kamala Harris wants as we go into the last week.
Yeah,
she wants chaos by talking about Nazis. So I think these are just the foot soldiers of the Democrat Party, doing their bit, trying to create some chaos.
And finally here, I want to reference an article that was in Breitbart. You did not write this, about Axios admitting that the establishment media has completely lost control of the narrative. And I think that's a good thing. I mean, you write for what I would consider an alternative news outlet. What I'm doing is basically alternative media here. It's like these people don't deserve the narrative. That's what I think.
Well, they've proven that they do not. And I feel like somebody should be writing a book about that, the cycle really killing off the big legacy, I guess we can call it a bunch of different things, but I think corporate media, legacy media, whatever. And really, you saw it with Trump going on Joe Rogan and all these other long form podcasts that Kamala can't really do because she's not very interesting. She doesn't have a lot to say. So she could never do it.
Right.
But it's really like Joe Rogan is he's the media, that kind of format is really taking over. And I think you've been around long enough too and watching politics. Every presidential cycle, they say, this is the year that the media died. I think it's really starting to die.
I do
really
too.
do. I think there's so many independent news sources now that they don't have any hope of keeping up unless they drastically change what they're doing.
I don't know if you saw this, but as of this afternoon, if I'm right, Rogan's interview with President Trump had 34 million views on YouTube. I can't think of a single television show that ever gets that. Yeah, it's huge, enormous.
That doesn't even count like people that are just doing audio streaming of it,
right?
Which is probably several million other.
Yeah,
and I think there's a good chance there's a lot of undecided voters in that audience.
So do I. It's probably the most effective thing he could have done as far as the media. I mean,
so good too. There's
Yeah.
nothing like free forming Trump to really entertain you. But do you think Kamala could ever do that? A 3-hour interview?
No,
She is
I
not
don't.
interesting at all.
No. I think when she did, what is it, Call Me Daddy, the podcast, I think it was an hour. I think she did an hour. I can't remember. I don't watch it, and I don't have any complaint with Joe
No.
Rogan. I think he's excellent, but I have to admit, I do not have 3 hours to devote to like anything.
Somebody does though, because he's always in the number one spot.
Oh, for sure. I know.
Spotify
I know.
anyway.
I am unusual.
Yeah,
That's right.
It was a great format for Trump. So,
it is.
I think the media really is broken, and I'm excited to see what happens from it, because it's lots of different kinds of new media things popping up, and I like it. And Elon Musk is certainly helping that along. So
yeah.
I am here for it.
Yeah, I am too, needless to say. And so, I mean, we're both doing our thing, so God bless you.
Yep, we'll keep it on.
Dear.
Keep on keeping on.
I want to thank you for doing this. So I can't get into on the air right now why. We've shortened the interviews here a little bit. I mean, I used to do an hour and a half, but we've shortened them for various reasons, which I can't talk about. But I want to thank you for joining us tonight, and I hope you come back. I really do.
Yeah, I would love to. I really appreciate the invitation to be on, and look forward to talking with you again soon.
I was impressed by your writing. That's what did it.
Thank you. I appreciate it. That is very kind.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Well, you're here, and I'm here too. How did that happen? Well, look.
I don't know. Isn't life grand?
Yeah, it is. You take care, all right? We'll talk to you, all right?
Yeah, you too. All right, talk soon.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
That's Teri Christoph from Leesburg, Virginia. She writes for Red State. Like, I didn't know this. She said at the top of the show, she said she's only been writing for Red State for a few weeks, and I didn't know that. I didn't know that at all. So, anyway, nice to talk to her. All right, we're going to take a little commercial break here. We're going to do part 2 of our little extravaganza. Stay tuned. Hi, all. Jim Peters again for Conk News. Let me tell you one of the greatest things about Conk News. It's free. It's completely and totally free. You don't need to register. You don't need to log in, subscribe, none of that stuff. Sure, they run a few ads on the front page, but if you're an old fogey like me, you might actually appreciate this, because when you check out Conk News at conk.com, you'll probably notice that it's the closest thing to an old-fashioned hard copy newspaper that you'll find online. The latest up-to-the-minute news from 75 high-quality sources collected every 3 hours, all laid out with photos and headlines directly from the articles. And when you click on a story, you go directly to that story. No ad page, no interstitial page, none of that stuff. This is the way online news is meant to be. And did I mention that it's completely free? Seriously, how much of the stuff in America is free now, right? That's of quality anyway. So check this out for yourself. It's at conk.com, CONK.com. Conk News. Okay, we have entered part 2 of Jim Peters at Night. This is the part where you call me. Call-in number is 563-999-3435. And yes, for you old-timers, we used to do webcam phone calls here. According to Talkers Magazine, this was the first talk show in America that actually took video phone calls, but we stopped doing it after a year and a half because I came to 2 conclusions. First of all, people thought it was way more complicated to get on than it was, and it isn't. That it was actually simple. It couldn't have been more simple. It was simpler than a FaceTime call. And secondly, I finally came to the conclusion that people didn't want their faces on the screen when they were calling in, which is the reason the audio of the phone thing, although it's kind of archaic and old school, it works out fantastic. So anyway, yeah, you can call me at 563-999-3435. In the meantime, I will prattle on like a normal idiot that I am, and we go part two of the show has always been about weird news, paranormal stuff. We do a lot of UFOs, and I got a lot of UFO news tonight. I do. So, first thing is I want to talk about Alexa, which reminds me, I got Alexa here on my desk, and I gotta shut it off because I'm going to mention her name, and she'll turn on, and we don't need that. We don't need that at all. So I don't know if you've seen this. Amazon had to apologize because if you asked Alexa up until recently, a few days ago, if you asked Alexa, tell me about Kamala Harris's tell me why I should vote for Kamala Harris, and Alexa would go down a list of her attributes. She's first of all, she's a woman of color and all. It'll be on, and she's had a lot of experience. If you ask the same question about Donald Trump, Alexa would say, I'm not supposed to talk about political candidates, on my little box. So what happened, according to Amazon, this is what happened. And this does make sense. And also, I'm a computer programmer. I'm involved in a lot of large-scale websites and services. I do believe them. But still, it bears there's a statistic here that will show that it's kind of telling. So Amazon says what happened is what they had it programmed for Trump and Biden. And when they did the switcheroo and dropped Biden and put Kamala in, they forgot to reprogram the system. And that actually makes sense. It's like, well, we did it already, but it's two different people. They forgot because what happened was basically like illegal, wasn't supposed to. So, they caught it after a bunch of complaints. But the other thing is, the other thing they said is that, and this is really telling, they said one of the problems was that we got so few requests for that question about Kamala Harris and didn't really register. And this is actually what happened. They said they got 14,000 requests for the question, why should I vote for Donald Trump? And only 224, not 224,000 or 100, only 224 for why should I vote for Kamala Harris. Do you get that? 14,000 versus 224. That's a 6,000% difference is what it is. So it didn't even register. So you can do with that information what you want. I'm starting to think it's becoming increasingly obvious that Trump is going to win this election. But still, that's the reason. One of the reasons they didn't change it. One is they had changed it already because they did a switcheroo and anyone forgot to notice. So, all right, and then we got the fact that Bruce Springsteen appeared at a rally last week for Kamala, and he's going to appear for another one. Is it tomorrow or Wednesday? I can't remember. So I don't know if you saw this, or I don't know if you watched this. I've watched it. I spent most of my life, my career as a classical musician too. So I know about music more than most other people. So apparently, Bruce Springsteen did an acoustic rendition of "Dancing in the Dark" with his guitar and just him, and it really sucks. He was terrible. It was just absolutely awful. And I had to really I listened to this, and I got to tell you that people can't tell you why it sucked. I can tell you why it sucked. Now, first of all, Bruce has never been able to had a good voice ever. But the thing is, he was good at singing his own stuff. It's like oh Jesus, Bob Dylan. It's like Bob Dylan. Bob Dylan can't sing to save his life, but his own music and his voice fit. Now, I don't know if you know this, but about 2-3 years ago, and apparently he's wanted to do this his whole life. So the guy's richer than God now, so he can afford to do it. He put on an album of Frank Sinatra standards. Now, you heard me right? This is Bob Dylan singing Frank Sinatra. And I've heard parts of that record. It's just terrible because Bob Dylan has no business singing Frank Sinatra. Oh, he can sing Bob Dylan. Great. He can do that. Fantastic. But no. Don't try to sing anything other than your own stuff, man. It's like, oh, Jesus. It's just It's one of the worst records I've ever heard. It's just terrible. So Springsteen's got the same problem. Bruce Springsteen actually can't sing, but he's good at singing his own stuff. Now that's not what happened here, because he is singing his own stuff. But what happened is that, I don't know if this is because he didn't have a band behind him, or if this is something with age. I mean, he's like 74, 75 years old now, but he couldn't keep rhythm to his own guitar. It was the rhythm of the song, the meter was all completely all over the place. And that's actually why it sucked. But you put that on top of the fact that he can't sing really very well in the first place, and it was just god awful. It was just terrible. I just find this hilarious. I mean, it's almost like the Kamala campaign, they can't do anything right. It's like it's like this is like just a comedy of errors from the get-go. I was going to ask Teri about this too, about the fact that the only real thing Kamala did well in this entire campaign cycle is the debate with Trump. She handled herself pretty well there, But the irony is, I mean, you stop and think about this. The irony is that debate didn't really give her a bump. I don't know, mostly because apparently people said, even though she was composed and she handled herself very well, she didn't actually answer any of the real questions, which is, of course, what she's been doing since the beginning. Conversely, I should have asked Teri about this. This was actually on my list. Conversely, the vice presidential debate actually had more weight in this cycle than the presidential debate did. Because first of all, they did a very good job demonizing J.D. Vance, and then he gets on TV and completely exonerates himself. And Tim Walz looked like, well, he called himself a knucklehead, and that's what he looked like. So yeah, okay, fine, yeah, knucklehead Tim. Now, this is in the news today, and I did not know this. Now, Tim Walz is the governor of Minnesota, and I'm sitting here in Minneapolis, but apparently he signed a bill a few months ago to give, how to explain this? He gave assistance to drug addicts, and the assistance was more drugs. This is a standard liberal thing. I think it's completely wrong, but they think, well, if you have addicts, you help them with their addiction, and by one of the ways you help them is by making certain the drugs are easier to procure, so they don't have to commit crime. But one of the things in this bill that Walz signed, and apparently, supposedly, this was his idea. I never heard about this. It's called, hold on just a second. It's called, I gotta find this. Is it called Booty Lickers or something like that? I can't find it. I'm gonna plow forward here. So there's a kit involved. They were passing out kits that allow people easy access to put drugs in their rectum. That's right, in their anus, in their butthole. Okay, you put the drugs in your butthole. Okay, all right. Now that's a great thing to do if you want to be vice president, isn't it? I don't know, man. More U.S. stores are closing. I have to tell you, and I talk about this with my friends and my accountant all the time. I would not want to be in retail at this particular juncture in history. It's like, because the only real retail, there's Amazon and there's everybody else. And I don't know about you. I order tons of stuff off Amazon. A lot of times, more maybe because I'm in a major city, more than often than not, it comes literally in a few hours. I don't even have to wait overnight. It's like, and why? Why buy it anywhere else? You don't have to leave the house. And at this point, I'm terrible. I've become a recluse. I don't want to. I don't want to leave the house. I used to be the life of every party I went to. My wife and I, bless her heart, I mean, we still do get so many social invitations. It's unbelievable. But I don't want to leave the house anymore. And not only that, supposedly the number of people, and this is kind of hard to fathom, but apparently this is true. More and more people who make an excess of $150,000 a year say they're living paycheck to paycheck. And that used to be a boatload of money here in the United States, 150,000, and they're living paycheck to paycheck. The last I saw a statistic that said 70% of the people in the United States couldn't come up with $400 on the spot if they had an emergency. They couldn't do it. 70%. And they're even including like a cash advance off a credit card. They're including that. All right, like you got to come up with $400 in an hour. Can you do it? 70% of the public can't. Yeah, this is really scary stuff. And so did it ever occur to the Democrats that maybe the reason they're going to lose this election is because simply they didn't do a good job? It's like they've done everything except actually do a good job. And and I think Trump has proved, and other presidents too, Bill Clinton. I've always been a Bill Clinton fan. I know there's a lot of Republicans who, hate his guts or think he was immoral, and maybe he was immoral. I don't care. It's like at this point, all I care about is what kind of job did you do? All I care about is the results. That's all I care about. I think Bill Clinton did a really good job, but that and in my mind, Clinton and Trump are the only two presidents since Reagan who basically moved the needle. It's like they're the only two that I can think of. Everyone else was basically just kind of plodding along. So, and I nowadays can't even remember why I actually brought that up, but about Clinton. But the thing is, yeah. So, if you're making $150,000 a year and you can't, and you're living paycheck to paycheck, something in this country is wrong. That's what I think. So here's a piece of news I know you want to know. There's a place in New Jersey called Rutan Hill, which is in Wantage, New Jersey, that they finally figured out used to be a giant, enormous volcano. Like this, going back like, millions of years. It was huge. It was a huge volcano, absolutely enormous. Now it's just a big hill. There's that. And speaking of big hills, Katie Price, who's in the UK, is what they call a presenter on television. Basically, like somebody, she's just on TV, like master MC stuff, whatever. She's on. But she is planning her 18th boob job because she finally came to the conclusion her fake breasts are too big, and she's known for her giant knockers. That's why she's famous in the first place. So she's going to have them reduced. I just thought, I put that with the volcano thing. I thought you'd want to know that. All right. And so here's the UFO stuff. So there's a guy named Daniel Sheehan. And if you know his name, he was the guy who represented, what's his name? Paul something, the Pentagon Papers during the Nixon administration. So this is going back 50 years. That's where he made his career. And he's been a very high-profile lawyer ever since. Now, lately, he's been representing some of the people that are called UFO whistleblowers. In particular, Luis Elizondo, the guy who ran ATIP, and David Grush, the guy who just appeared before Congress a few months ago and said that he knew for a fact that we had crashed extraterrestrial spacecraft. And I've been telling people that for 30 years. It's so obvious we do. It's unbelievable. At any rate, this is Sheehan now. Daniel Sheehan's giving a talk at Yale University. He also runs the New Paradigm Institute, which is an institute, a nonprofit organization that's set up to for transparency in the UFO subject. Anyway, in that speech, Sheehan claimed a few things. First of all, he claimed the fact that Majestic 12 is real. So I don't know if you know about this. This is like going back to 1986, and it was Shalala. I can't remember that guy's name either. Shalala. Was it Justin? Got a roll of film in the mail, and he developed it, and it turned out it was supposedly a top secret document from 1947 signed by Truman. And the document was about setting up a committee to handle the UFO situation in the United States. And there are 12 people listed were very, very prominent. There were generals, prominent scientists. 12 people listed on this committee, and it was called Majestic. And because there were 12 people, it was called Majestic 12. But the documents that this guy got sent have never really been authenticated. There's people that, there's opinions back and forth. Stanton Friedman, who I consider, until he died a few years ago, the preeminent UFO researcher in the United States. He was a nuclear physicist by trade, which is one of the reasons he was a really, really hardcore scientist. But he said he spent years going through this with a fine-tooth comb and came to the conclusion they were real. And he was even analyzing typewriter fonts. That's how detailed he got with this. So he said that after several years of researching this, he came to the conclusion they're real. Several other people have done the same thing. There's several people who say they're just fakes. Now I have to say, if this is fake, it's a ridiculous amount of work to go through to fake something. I mean, an enormous amount of work, because these documents, I don't know in pages, I think it's about 100, but the information in there, first of all, it's very consistent. The information is consistent in and of itself. It also is consistent with that time in history too. So if somebody were to do that, it would take an enormous amount of work to fake these. But that doesn't mean it couldn't be done. It doesn't. Anyway, Sheehan says now that he knows for a fact that those documents are real. That's the first thing he said. The second thing he said there's at least 2 alien bases on Earth, and he knows where one of them is exactly, and it's off the coast of Southern California, down by Baja. And actually, this has been rumored for a long time, because he says the military has film of over 100 UFOs coming in and out of the water. Over 100, that's what he says. But the thing is, that's where the Nimitz was stationed when they saw those Tic Tac stuff. And this has been rumored for a long time in that particular, this is kind of off Catalina. It's off the southern end of Catalina Island. It's between Catalina and, let me see, what's the name of this place? Guadalupe, if I'm right. Guadalupe Island. And if you go down there and just sit on the shore on the mainland, you can watch UFOs going in and out of the water all the time. I mean, seriously, apparently it's like a tourist thing, And not only that, there's film, infrared film from satellites that show a very, very weird thing in the water there that looks like an artificial build out. For lack of a better term, I don't know what, it looks like a building underwater is what it looks like. So this has been rumored forever, but he's saying that is one of the 2 places. He hasn't actually said where the other places, but he said that the primary bases the aliens have on Earth are either in the water or high up in a mountain. That's what he says. So, okay, fine. And then the last thing he says, he confirms the fact that not only are alien abductions happening, but he's also confirmed the scenario about aliens stealing sperm and eggs from humans and recombining them to make hybrid babies. Now, I said this at the top of the show. I'm trying to get Jazz Shaw to come on here, because he's kind of we talk about UFOs regularly with him, and he's really connected to the military on this subject. He's a UFO guy, call him the UFO guy for Salem Media. And I haven't been able to get a hold of him yet. I know everyone's busy because of the election. That's the problem. But I want to know what he thinks about this, because the thing is, there's 2 things that are going on here. Either Sheehan's trying to draw attention to himself for whatever reason, and right now in America, attention is a coin of the realm, or he's serious. And he might be serious because, like I said, all those 3 things I mentioned here have long been rumored. Even the exact location of that base has long been rumored. And so it wouldn't be a surprise if he was right. So, but it's so blatant. He's at Yale University, for Christ's sake. And this guy, like I said, is highly credible. He's been, he spent his entire life doing important stuff. So, but he's not the only person who said this stuff either. So more and more quote unquote important people are coming out talking about this shit. So I just said the bad word, and I shouldn't do that. All right. Well, you haven't called me, and that's fine. Okay. So we're coming back tomorrow night, and I don't know if or who our guest is going to be. I don't know. We might take Wednesday off. I don't know about that too. We have a big Halloween show coming up on Thursday, and although this show's become largely audio oriented recently. That show I think you want to watch on Rumble. I think you want to watch it because we got a bunch of really old guys and a bunch of costumes, and they're making asses out of themselves. That's why. So anyway, yeah, we'll be back tomorrow. I don't know what we got going on yet, but we'll be back with something. So I want to thank you folks for watching and listening. You make this show possible for sure. I want to thank Clunk News for sponsoring us. Good night, Esperanza. Good night, Uncle Donnie. And good night to you, wherever you are. We'll see you tomorrow night, everybody. Take care.